Phil Benyon, Liberal Democrat MEP for the West Midlands. Let's recap first of all a little bit about this problem. What issue has China from China been causing to producers in the potteries?
Well, there has been a study by the Commission, and they have shown that the Chinese are using a form of predatory pricing into the UK and European markets on ceramics, on tableware, which is actually undercutting our home producers.
And what kind of impact has that been having on the home producers, on producers in your constituency, in terms of their sales and then ultimately their jobs?
Well, they've been losing sales, they've been losing jobs. In Stoke-on-Trent, I think the figures are around about 4,000 jobs gone over since 2008. It seems to have stabilised just at the moment, but that's been quite a profound loss of jobs, about 30%, I think.
You managed to get a temporary reprieve in place for 6 months where there was a trade barrier in place from some of the Chinese producers. Have you seen any marked difference? Have the producers come to you and said that's helped over the last 6 months, which has helped your argument for saying this needs to be a permanent solution?
Absolutely, they have. I've spoken to Steelite particularly, and they have seen a real recovery in their sales. And Steelite have been very, very helpful in giving us the information for this particular issue. And I went with them to visit BIS, the BIS department in London, and to put the case for the permanent solution.
Now, last time round, when this first came up, the UK government wasn't actually that supportive of this idea. Have you managed to convince Vince Cable and other ministers that this is a trade barrier worth supporting?
Well, it seems so, yes, because the advisory committee now has voted, and the view of BIS originally, when I wrote to BIS to find out what their objections were that they thought the tariffs were too high. So myself and Steelite went back to BIS and suggested that we continue the tariffs for the full 5 years, but at a lower level. Now, this now seems to be exactly what has happened.
What's the likelihood, do you think, now the European Commission have put forward proposals for making a more permanent tariff put in place, what's the likelihood that ministers will rubber stamp this, will back this? Because you'll need a majority, technically speaking, you need a majority of ministers from across Europe for this to go through, don't you? Yes,
well, the advisors have already met, and they have cleared this. And so it looks like, unless the ministers now go against their advisors, it's very, very unlikely. It very, very rarely happens. So it now looks like it's not certain, but I would say it's over 90% certain now that this will go ahead. You talked about the lobbying that you've done of your own government, the UK government. What about other governments in Europe? Have you had to work hard to convince some of those that this is something that we need for our industry? Well, I haven't personally been involved in lobbying other governments, but I have discussed this with the industry in the UK and with industry players in the UK, and have encouraged them to use their colleagues, their other companies across Europe to do exactly the same, and they have had actually a concerted lobbying approach across Europe.
And what about the counter point of view, that this is kind of anti-competitive in a world where we want to move to more free trade?
Yes, well, there has been an alternative argument, largely from the importers, of course, because it's the importers that pay the tariffs. Now, the importers bring less jobs to the UK than the manufacturers do. And, of course, there are very complex situations where some companies are both import and manufacture, and they have a more balanced view. So, yes, there has been a lobbying by the importers too, who have been pressing the view that it will put up prices. Well, it should put up prices marginally, but only marginally. But in the long term, of course, it keeps competition in the marketplace, because when you have predatory pricing, it's usually to try and force the competitors out of business. And if the competitors are forced out of business, it gives a clear run then to the remaining businesses.
So if you can get this finally rubber stamped and approved, Do you think this puts the West Midlands industry on a firmer footing? How important is it to have this in place?
Yeah, so it's quite clear from talking to the industry, and they have been very, very reasonable. The industry have agreed that the original tariffs were too high, and they didn't need tariffs that high, but they say that what looks like to be in the proposals now, what looks likely, is sufficient for them to recover, and within the 5-year period they don't envisage the need for repeating the process in 5 years' time. They think that in the next 5 years they can compete on fair terms, on a level playing field terms, with the Chinese and other importers.
And just finally, what's the impact therefore on jobs and their sales if they've got this barrier in place that they're happy with?
I think that it secures the jobs in Stoke-on-Trent, particularly. We've also got other manufacturers in the region and just outside in Derby and other places. So this, I think, for the Midlands generally and for Stoke-on-Trent in particular, is very, very good news.